So over 6 months ago when we planned this series, it was obviously this is going to be an extremely emotionally charged election season, right? And I think we've exceeded all expectations, haven't we? We knew that on November 3rd, our nation would be casting its votes and placing their hopes on a political party and on a candidate. And this series was really intended to remind us that 2,000 years ago, real hope arrived in the person of Jesus, not through a political agenda or social solutions. And as followers of Jesus, this season does not need to be our breaking point. You know, you probably have had some maybe hopes for this sermon today. You might have some hopes about what issues I might bring up or what I might address. And maybe you haven't even seen the last 3 sermons, so some of the things that you're hoping that I'm going to say may have possibly already been said, will be said next week. So I want to tell you what I'm going to talk about today. I want to speak to something that I think is crushing some of you. It's called the narrative of fear. You may not be aware that you've had this narrative peddled to you over the last season. You might be unknowingly perpetuating it with conversations or with your social media interactions. You may not even be aware that it's the major contributor to your exhaustion right now. So my hope today is to replace the narrative of fear with the assurance of spiritual peace. You know, I really mean this. Dave D'Angelo, I think our lead pastor, he made a really wise decision to tackle this series, to look at the biblical and spiritual reality of this election season that we are in. And last week, I thought it was brilliant the way that Dave, he opened up what could be a sermon filled with tension. He opened it up with that little David Letterman top 10 list thing, right? Just to sort of start us out that way. So I thought today I would bring down the tension too. I've got my own little top 5 list. You know, I'm just trying to be like Dave. Dave's my hero. I was actually thinking about bringing that little stool up on the stage and sit down, stand up like he does. I was thinking about teaching this sermon in white sneakers, cuff my jeans. Dave, when he has those white sneakers, when he's preaching, you know what he does? He brings them to the church in a bag. He does. He wears his number 2 white sneakers with him. So he don't want to scuff, his number 1 white sneaker. So what I have here is 5 basic, what I think would be called emotion-filled political terms that have been bantered about over this season. These words, these phrases are for some of you at the core. You've sort of allowed these to bring that narrative of fear. And I'm going to put them in really simple language so that we can all understand them. I'm going to use the analogy of owning cows. We'll see if it works, but I'm going to try. It's like think of this as political lingo for dummies. All right, so here's the first one. Dictatorship. You've heard this, right? Oh, what are we becoming? We're going to become a dictatorship, if he wins. So here we go. Here's dictatorship, for simple dictatorship. You have 2 cows, the government takes both and puts you in jail. Like that's a dictatorship. Here's one I know that some of you, socialism. Oh man, if so-and-so, we're going to become a socialist nation, right? All right, so what does that mean? Here we go. You have 2 cows. The government takes one of your cows and gives it to your neighbor. But somehow the government ends up with all of the cows, and you have to wait in line for milk. There it is. Okay, now you got it now? See where we're going? Have I offended anybody yet? Be patient. Here's one, capitalism, right? Capitalism. You have 2 cows. You lay one off, and you force the other to produce the milk of 4 cows. You are surprised when she drops dead, all right? Okay, so buckle up. The Democratic Party. This one's a little longer, stay with me. You have 2 cows, your neighbor has none. You feel guilty for being successful, so you vote for politicians who tax your cows. You're forced to sell a cow to pay the taxes. The government uses the tax money to buy your neighbor a cow, and you feel better and need a hug. Okay? One more, the Republican Party. I could not leave you out. You have 2 cows, your neighbor has none. You move to a better neighborhood. Huh? Okay, so there you go. So someone, I'm telling you though, has been using those words over this season to make you afraid. So I just tried to lighten things up a little bit before I make this statement that I think most of you will disagree with. Have you heard this? How many of you believe it? This is the most important election of our lifetime. Well, unless you're 4 years old, I'm not sure that's true. See, that is the narrative that's created to produce fear. So we've had elections in this country while we were at war. We've had elections in this country under devastating economic depressions. This may be one of the most divisive elections in history, but to say it's the most important, it sets you up for like a breeding ground of this narrative of fear. Because to say that, it's intended to make you believe that if your candidate doesn't win, that you should be panic-stricken. See, I read an article recently that really resonated with me. And the journalist said that there's probably 10% of people that are on the extreme left, right? And there's probably another 10% that are on the extreme right. And I'm not even saying that their opinions are extreme. What I'm saying is that they are literally unwilling to listen to or possibly learn from anybody that's not in their camp. And you know these folks, right? You might be one of these folks. I've probably blocked you or snoozed you from social media to after Thanksgiving, so enjoy your turkey and stuffing. I'll see you again in December. See, the journalist, what he goes on to say, that the rest of us are in what he calls the exhausted middle. Like you've made up your mind, chose the camp or the candidate some time ago, but what you've been doing is reading things selectively or listening to people, all with the hopes of affirming the camp that you're in. And the reason for your exhaustion is that the fear narrative has just left us flat out tired. So for the next few minutes, I'd like to talk to you maybe about redefining your camp. First, you must fully understand that you are supposed to trust an almighty God and not an elected commander-in-chief. See, when I preach a sermon on the election, I have virtually nothing to work from as far as material that's in the Bible. You know, someone came up to me once and said, it's your Christian obligation to vote. Like my Christian obligation, folks, is to do what Jesus said and did according to the biblical narrative. And Jesus never voted. Democracy was never established like a foothold in Jesus' day. But please hear me though. I do think it's our civic responsibility to vote, and I think it's extremely important. Just trying to head some emails off there. You heard me say it. I think it's extremely important to vote. You know, there's only one election in the New Testament. It's found in Acts 1, and the disciples decided to replace Judas to bring their number back to 12. And it says the two qualified candidates were presented. That makes sense. Right? And then it says they prayed to God. That makes sense. And then in verse 26, it says they cast lots. And the lot fell on Matthias. They threw dice. So here's some biblical advice for you about the election. Pray about it, and then wake up Tuesday morning and throw some dice to see who you should vote for, because that's what the Bible says. Like, so if I haven't already, stepped on some toes, here we go. Folks, I don't believe there is a party that God is saying right now, like he's looking down and saying, you're the team. Like, you're the team I want to win. Like to me, that's like praying to God for the Steelers to beat the Ravens this weekend. I don't think God has anything against the Ravens. He does seem to not be a Browns fan. I'm just saying, like facts are facts, right? We pray Steelers beat the Browns and they beat the Browns. So, but hear me, I recognize that there are consequences in the election. And I don't want to minimize. And I realize that certain parties' platforms or viewpoints may not always be equal before God. However, if we're going to take aim at this fear this narrative of fear, it means that we have to stop trying to co-opt God into our camp, onto our team, because that's not the way he operates. And I really think I can give you some evidence of that. In Joshua, in the Old Testament, the book of Joshua, chapter 5, we find this godly leader named Joshua. Moses has led the nation of Israel out of slavery in Egypt, and Moses died just being able just to get a glimpse of the promised land. And now it's up to Joshua to lead the nation. And with Moses' death, like Joshua has taken over, and you got to hear me on this, he is following God. He's doing some amazing things. And he's imparting like God's vision and health and direction to God's people. And they are poised for this major battle of Jericho. And I'm telling you right now, in this moment, there wouldn't be anybody that wouldn't say that God's on Joshua's side, that God's on Joshua's team, right? And Joshua, in this preparation for battle, he goes out and gets a little quiet time. And in verse 13, this is what it says. When Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in his hand. So we're going to find out later. This is an angel. And this is the angel of the Lord's army. And Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" And he said, "No, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth, and he worshiped, and he said to him, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" Joshua, like he's asking the question here, right? Whose side are you on? Whose camp are you for? And the angel appears to take offense to it and says, "No, not on either side. I'm on God's side." I think Joshua had to be shocked. So are we attempting to co-opt God and place our agenda and our goals and our purpose on him? Or are we trying to wedge him into things like and boldly claim like you're the adversary, like your side, you're the adversary of God. You're the ones not on the side of God. Did you pick up the turning point for Joshua in that moment? He said, "What does the Lord say to his servant?" See, I think the turning point for us is when we stop trying to judge or to evaluate whether people are on the right side or the wrong side. And we simply go before God in all humility. "What do you want from me, your servant?" And my guess is that I don't believe God would answer that question by saying, "You know what I want you to do? Go write a 500-word vehement rant on Facebook." Or I'll tell you what I want you. Why don't you go rip the opposing candidate's sign out of your neighbor's yard? See, is it possible that you're doing that, even if you're not maybe doing it, but you're allowing that narrative to creep in? And you're buying into this fear narrative versus what could and you can find spiritual peace. I'm going to ask it again. Have you found yourself in the exhausted middle? So see, this is the issue at the center of an encounter that Jesus has with a politician named Pilate. Pilate, at this point, he's the Roman governor of Judea, and he's actually the one that oversaw the proceedings that led to Jesus' execution. And in ancient Rome at this time, to attain that kind of a political position or that kind of spot, Pilate would have had to pander to some people. He would have had to do some favors. He would have had to get noticed. And in this encounter with Jesus, Pilate, he's only concerned about the current political realm. So, see, he wants things to play out what are best for his personal and political views and agenda. And Jesus says in John 18, verse 36, he says to him, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. He says it again, but my kingdom is not of this world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" And Jesus said, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Jesus, in that moment, what he's doing is he's just trying to explain that his kingdom is not about this current political realm or nation. He is saying that his kingdom existed, he's saying this to Pilate, well before Rome, and certainly long before America, right? It's a kingdom that is ever expanding. And its citizens, man, this is why the citizens of this kingdom, they are marked by peace and power and a walk with God. See, the kingdom citizens have a peace that are never going to be found in a political camp. See, a fair narrative, it causes us to choose political camps. A kingdom narrative realizes that we are chosen. Folks, I refuse. Like I'm just telling you, I just refuse to buy into this fear narrative. Now hear me, I'm not walking around saying, like chill, man, like take it easy. No, I'm boldly walking around saying, take heart. Like, is your heart sold out to the political systems of our day? Or is your heart embracing God and his kingdom and is being reassured that like he's working in and through all of our political frailties? Jesus says in John 16, he says, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you're going to have tribulation, troubles, anxiety, fear, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Do you really believe that you can't have peace unless the person you want to see elected wins? Folks, I've visited countries living under dictatorships, and they will take your cows and put you in jail for professing a faith in Jesus Christ. And under these oppressive governments, I have encountered Christians living with far more peace than some of us are right now. In fact, I think some of them would be puzzled by our reliance on a political party's candidate rather than Jesus Christ. Like a narrative of fear or the Prince of Peace? You know, which one represents you more as we head toward Tuesday? See, if we only see our country as right or left, then we're going to miss the peace that can be found from above. So I want to close with just 3 simple thoughts, like to help us all fight this fear narrative that I think is crushing or exhausting us in this season. And this first one, I think it's been said somewhere in this sermon series already, but it's just so simple: people over politics. Like, right, Jesus laid down his life for people, not for political parties. Like, listen to me on this one. Who you vote for on Tuesday is not in the top 50 decisions that you're going to make in the next few months. Because I think there's way more important decisions that you personally are going to make in the next several months. Like things like, am I going to fight for my marriage? Am I going to stop drinking so much? Will I begin to pray? Decisions like, will I decide to stop working so many hours so that I can love my children well? Will we have children? Should we adopt or foster? Will I stop turning to that vice that is morally bankrupting me? Will I be generous, or will I just continue to accumulate stuff for me? Will I love the neighbor that has a different sign in his yard than me? See, those are the decisions that will impact the people that God has placed in your life. Those are the decisions that will change your life way more than whoever wins the election. The second one is this: personal impact over political parties. Political parties are corporations. They're designed to raise resources and generate power. Well, hear me on this, though. There are some wonderful politicians in both parties, locally and nationally. And they are truly in politics for the right reasons. They are not perpetuating the fear narrative. And they should be commended for their impact in politics. However, not many of us are called into the political arena, right? Yet we are all called to make a personal impact. I received an email last week from a couple that, there's nobody that I respect more that I've ever met at Northway than these folks. And I just want to read it for you. The email said, "Hey, a new couple just moved on our street, and I've been looking for an opportunity to go over and say hello, but they seem to be really private people. They're never outside. And the street that I live on has nothing but Trump yard signs." Well, then it happened. The new couple posted 5 Biden signs in their front yard. Uh-oh. Within 2 days, several were pulled out and trashed. The couple had to be thinking they made a bad move by moving to this street. 2 days later, they put out some new and bigger signs, and they added a sign: "No trespassing, private property." On Saturday night, he goes on and he says that my wife and I went to a local nursery, and we were going to get a few mums, some flowers to put in some pots for our front porch. And God said to him in that moment, "Here's what I want you to do." Stopped him and said, "I want you to go buy an extra mom, and I want you to take it over to that new neighbor." So when he got home, he took the mom over to the new neighbor, and his wife ran out to get a prescription filled at a local pharmacy. And he said, "I had a great conversation with this young new neighbor. Nothing about politics, of course, and I discovered that they moved here to be closer to his wife's job, a pharmacist. And as I was speaking to my new neighbor, my wife was meeting that pharmacist, getting a prescription filled. That pharmacist said, 'Oh, look at this address on here. I'm your new neighbor.'" They had this incredible conversation, the two women, at the exact same time the two men were having an unbelievable conversation. He went on to say, "Our God doesn't tear out yard signs. He builds bridges." P.S., in case you're wondering, we have a Go Rams sign in our front yard. That's a local football team, local high school football team. Man, are you willing to build bridges? Choose to make personal impacts over political parties. Third one, last one, your God or your candidate? Pretty simple, I know. In the Old Testament, I love the story of Daniel. Daniel came from nobility. He was enjoying a great life when, as a teenager, his world was shattered. Babylon invaded, and crushed sort of Israel. And others like Daniel, they were hauled off into exile to become servants of King Nebuchadnezzar, exiled to his capital city. And Daniel did what was asked of him by this foreign society and its rulers, but he did not ever yield to the godly principles in his beliefs. And I love the story of the book of Daniel because some of these stories, right? 3 of his friends ended up in a fiery furnace, but what was meant for evil, God turned to just something unbelievably positive, and faith prevailed. And then fast forward, as you read through the rest of the book of Daniel, Persia comes in and defeats Babylon, and Daniel is now subject to a new king, a new government. King Darius now steps in. Daniel, he's now an old man. He survived several governments. They say at this point, he may have been 70, 80, or even 90 years old, and all the while he remains faithful to his God, not the rulers of the day. But if you know the story, he gets set up. And because of his unwillingness to bow down or take a knee for a foreign god, King Darius basically issues a death penalty. And he asks Daniel to be cast into the lion's den. And Darius had become fond of Daniel over their time. And Darius says to Daniel, as he's being thrown into that lion's den, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. If you know the story, God did. In my office hangs a picture. It's traveled with me for a while, and I've always loved it because it's Daniel in the lion's den, but it's depicting Daniel correctly. He's an old man. And I love this picture because he's at peace. He's not focused on the lions. He's looking up to his Lord. Like Nebuchadnezzar was Babylon and Darius was Persia, but for Daniel, nothing changed. Who's bigger? Your God or a candidate or the political systems of today? I've asked the band to sort of join me, to help me sort of close this service. And as they do that, can I just sort of summarize some things from me to you? God is not for one particular candidate. He's for you. He's not for politics. He's for people. He desires that our lives have an impact on future generations, and not for the left or for the right, but for him. Man, please hear me on this. Take heart. Like our king is not bound by red states and blue states or current political realms. Do not allow the narrative of fear to rob you of your spiritual peace. Folks, do not fear lions. Focus on the Lamb of God, Jesus Christ.